Handling an NSF check for an account customer is different from handling a cash customer's NSF check because the cash customer we were just able to do a credit and rebill, but because the payment is posted in accounts receivable for an account customer, the program doesn't allow us to do a credit and rebill. Now there are two basic methods of how we can handle an NSF check for an account customer. One method would be what I call the debit method and is explained in another tutorial. And then this is what is called the invoice method, in which we basically do a credit and rebill like we would for a cash customer NSF check, but we just have to go through the steps a little bit differently because the program won't allow us to use the normal credit rebill feature that we would use on a cash customer account. So to begin with, we're going to go ahead and pull up the invoice in which we had the NSF check. And as you can see in the payments area there, the payment has been applied. And then the balance down at the bottom there is showing 0. And if we were to try and go to credit and rebill and run through a credit rebill, it'll tell us that there's an AR payment applied and it can't be done as a full credit. So what we need to do is first, I want to go ahead and jot down the amount of material. So at the top of the totals box here, that material amount of 261.28, we're going to just jot that down for reference in a minute. And then labor of $66. And the reason we do this is I want to create a credit invoice that's going to basically be identical to this invoice. The only difference will be we're not going to use the part numbers that are on here because those part numbers have already been sold, so we're going to use a different part number, but we want the material and labor to match. And then we will create a new invoice with those same amounts. So now that we've jotted down those numbers, we're going to go ahead now and go to the credit rebill area, but again, we can't use option number 1, the credit and rebill. So we're going to go with option number 4 and just do an open credit to this customer's account. So we're going to reference back the original ticket there, 130. And then I don't have anything in my reasons here for an NSF check. Now you could go under admin and configuration and go to the credit reasons and add that in for future reference. We'll just go ahead and type our note here though. NSF check number 123456 for invoice 130. And we'll hit finish. Okay, and now we're on an open credit. And if you're not familiar with the open credit, there are tutorials on that. But basically now I've got what looks to be like a normal quote screen. And I'm going to do everything the same way I would if I was doing an invoice. I'm not going to make anything negative. The program's going to do that automatically when I'm done and I save this. It'll automatically convert everything from a positive to a negative. So now I'm going to just do this sort of like a normal ticket. I'm going to first go ahead and put in my account. And now down here in the parts section, again, I don't want to use the parts that were actually sold. I don't need to. So I'm just going to type in a manual part number. So I'm just going to call mine return. And then it's going to ask me if I'm adding a manual item. I'm going to say yes. And now I'm just going to go ahead and in the description, I'm going to put NSF check number 123456 for invoice 130. And now I will just go over to the material and I'm going to put that material amount that was on the original of 261.28. And then I'm going to go over into the labor, put it into the $66. And now I've got the same balance as what the original was, 342.96. Now again, because of the NSF check, I need to put in a new invoice for this customer, show they once again owe us for this invoice. And I also need to, if I'm using accounts payable, which if you're not, then you're not going to worry about this portion of it, but you still want to do things the same way, as I want to put a negative payment into my daily deposit so I can take that 342.96 out of my bank account because obviously the money's no longer in the account. So I'm going to accomplish that by sort of treating this as if it's a cash ticket, and I'm just going to go ahead and go to the payments tab. I'm going to put in a negative 342.96. And then for the payment type, I'm going to go ahead and change it to check. Now, if you really wanted to, you could go into the admin configuration into the payment types, and we could create a payment type for NSF check. But normally you don't run across NSF checks very often, or at least hopefully you don't. And so because of that, it's not really a necessity. I just put it in as a check. And then in the check number field here, I'm just going to go ahead and put in NSF. All right, now when I go ahead and save this, it's going to make everything negative. And I made one little boo-boo here. At the beginning, I told you, don't put in any negatives. Just leave everything positive, and the program's going to do it. And then what did I do? I put in a negative. So we'll take that out. So now I've got in my 342, and we can see my balance is 0. And so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, one other thing, when I put this credit in here and I put in that manual part, for the category all the way over there to the right, I just put it to miscellaneous auto. And that's fine. We can let it go to whatever category it wants to go to, as long as when we do the new invoice, we also put it to that exact same category. And then the two basically cancel each other out in our general ledger if we're using general ledger. So that's important to note. And the other thing too is if NSF checks do happen from time to time, you can actually put a part in your part file for that return check instead of putting it as a manual part every time. It's up to you. But since it's hopefully a rare occurrence, probably not worth the time to put it in as a part number. All right, so now we've created our credit, and there's no balance on it, so I don't have to do anything in accounts receivable. Now I can once again put a new invoice in on this customer's account, and this credit and the new invoice basically balance each other out as a 0 amount, so I haven't really added anything into my sales. So I will go ahead and just choose new, and I'm going to do it just like I did the credit. I'm going to just put in the account. I'm going to come down in here into the part number. I'm going to go ahead and put in the same part number I used before. And again, say yes there. And then I'm going to just basically the same description. NSF check number 123456 from invoice 130. And obviously you can add more to the description in that if you want to. And we're going to go ahead once again in the material and labor, put in the same amounts as we had on the original ticket, so everything lines up. And now here's the other thing we're going to add though to the invoices. Because of the return check, obviously we got charged a fee from our bank, so we're going to pass that charge along on to the customer. So we're going to add in an NSF fee. Now, this particular part, I actually do have a part in my parts file, and if you watch the cash customer NSF check video, you saw when we did that. And so I'm just going to add that NSF charge in there. I've already got it set to $35. Obviously, you could go in and change that to any amount that you want to. And now our ticket is for $377.96, and I'm just going to go ahead and save that as an invoice, choose OK. Now that's taking care of the accounts receivable side. I now have an invoice 132 on the Blackwell Ford account. So now when their statements go out, it'll be on their statement. I also can print this out and send it to them. And if you wanted to add any additional notes, we could of course go to the notes tab and do that. Now I have to handle the AP side. Again, if you're not using the full accounting and you're only using accounts receivable at this point, you can consider yourself done. But if you're using the full accounting, we have to go ahead now and go to our daily deposit. And in our daily deposit, we're going to have that negative 342 that we had put in for the credit. Now you can ignore that 342, the positive one on the top line there. That was just the AR payment I had posted initially on the original invoice, and that basically represents the check that bounced. This negative 342 though, that represents the NSF check, the bouncing of it. And so this is going to, because it's a negative, by depositing a negative, it's going to take that amount out of our check register. So we're going to mark it to be deposited. And here in the date, we want to just change this date back to whatever date we were notified of the NSF fee by our bank as to when it affected our account. And then again, whenever you do something a little out of the ordinary, and a negative payment and a deposit is kind of out of the ordinary, I always like to put a note in the note section there. So I'm going to go ahead and just once again put in a similar note to all the ones I put in before, and just put in NSF check number 123456 from invoice 130. And now I'm going to go ahead and choose save, and now we have our negative deposit. And that pretty much takes care of everything. I have taken out the NSF from my checking account. I put a new invoice in on the customer's account so that and I've added a service fee to that invoice. So now when they pay, when I go to post that in AR, it's going to have the correct amount in there. The only other thing you may need to do is, again, your bank obviously will charge you a service fee for that NSF check, so you need to record that in your check register. Now on commercial accounts, most of the time that's just added into all of your other service fees for the month, and that is going to be on your bank statement at the end of the month, so you can normally just handle that at the end of the month with all the other service fees. However, if your bank does post that service fee on your account during the month at the time the NSF fee happened, you can go ahead and go into the AP check register credit card adjustment section, put in the amount of the fee that they charged you, and for the type, put in the service charge. Make sure you have the appropriate bank account selected. Select the correct date that the fee was put on your account. And then for the general ledger account, you should have some sort of bank service charge general ledger account set up. If you don't, you would probably want to go ahead and put that into your chart of accounts. And then again, I like to put a note on any kind of adjustments I make. So we'll just go ahead and put in NSF service fee for check number 123456 for invoice 130, and then I would save that, and now I've also deducted my service fee for that NSF check from my bank account. So that is the invoice method of how to handle an NSF check for an account customer. Again, the other method is the debit method. I think the debit method is actually a little bit faster and easier to do, but you can watch the tutorial on that and judge for yourself and pick which method is going to work best for you.